Have you ever felt deeply abandoned? So forsaken that your heart cries out for justice that seems nowhere to be found? In the ancient hills of Jerusalem around 1000 BC, a psalmist put these very feelings into words that would echo through millennia. But here's what's fascinating. While most people think King David wrote all the Psalms, Psalm 43 is actually one of the rare anonymous psalms, though many scholars believe it was originally connected to Psalm 42, forming a single composition expressing profound spiritual longing. Why does this matter to us today? Because in our world of instant gratification and surface-level connections, this ancient Hebrew poem speaks to something we've all experienced. That moment when we feel utterly abandoned, when those we trusted have betrayed us, when justice seems like a distant dream. And the answer? It comes in the most unlikely form through a raw, unfiltered conversation with the divine. Vindicate me, O God, and defend my cause against an ungodly people. From those who are deceitful and unjust deliver me. These words from Psalm 43 ring across time, from ancient scrolls to our modern ears. What's remarkable is that the psalmist doesn't hide their pain or sugarcoat their experience. They call directly to God, demanding justice in the face of overwhelming opposition. When we read this psalm in its original historical context, we're transported to a tumultuous period in ancient Israel. The exact dating remains debated among biblical scholars, but most place its composition sometime during the late monarchy period, approximately between the 8th and 6th centuries BCE. This was a time of significant political upheaval, with threats from powerful empires like Assyria and Babylon looming over Israel. Dr. Sarah Robertson, professor of ancient Near Eastern studies at Cambridge, explains, "What makes Psalm 43 particularly poignant is that it likely emerged from a collective trauma. The psalmist speaks not just for themselves, but for a community experiencing profound displacement and questioning where God is in their suffering." The psalmist begins with an urgent plea for vindication. The Hebrew word used here, shaphat, carries legal connotations of judgment and making things right. This isn't just a request for emotional comfort, it's a demand for cosmic justice. The psalmist believes they have been wrongfully treated and appeals to the highest authority for intervention. But who exactly is this ungodly people the psalmist mentions? The text describes them as deceitful and unjust. Historical context suggests this could refer to foreign oppressors, political enemies within Israel, or even fellow religious leaders who had corrupted their positions. The phrase, ungodly people, translates the Hebrew, goy lo chassid, literally, a nation without covenant faithfulness. This strongly suggests these opponents weren't just personal enemies, but represented a fundamental threat to the psalmist's entire way of life and belief system. The anguish continues in verse 2. "For you are the God in whom I take refuge. Why have you cast me off? Why must I walk about mournfully because of the oppression of the enemy?" This honest lament reveals something profound about ancient Hebrew spirituality that often gets lost in modern religious discourse. The psalmist doesn't hesitate to question God directly. There's an intimate relationship here that allows for real questions, real pain, real doubt. The psalmist feels abandoned by the very God they claim as their refuge. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals that the concept of divine abandonment was common throughout the ancient Near East. In Mesopotamian traditions, when disaster struck, it was often interpreted as the city's patron deity withdrawing their protection. What's distinctive in the Hebrew tradition, however, is that even in this apparent abandonment, the psalmist continues to dialogue with God rather than simply accepting fate. Dr. Michael Levin, professor of ancient Hebrew poetry at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, notes, "The tension in Psalm 43 is palpable. The psalmist simultaneously affirms God as their refuge while accusing this same God of abandonment. This paradox isn't a contradiction, but reflects the complex reality of faith in crisis." The psalmist doesn't remain in despair, though. In verse 3 we hear, "Oh, send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling." This imagery of divine light and truth being sent forth like guides represents a crucial turning point. The Hebrew words used here, or for light and emeth for truth, appear frequently in biblical literature as attributes of God's character. Light represented both physical illumination and moral clarity, while truth encompassed reliability, faithfulness, and stability. The holy hill referenced is almost certainly Mount Zion in Jerusalem, where the temple stood as the center of Israelite worship. Archaeological excavations at the Temple Mount have revealed the immense significance this location held in ancient Israelite religion. The temple wasn't just a building, but the nexus where heaven and earth were believed to meet. Historical records indicate that pilgrimages to Jerusalem's temple were central to Israelite religious practice, especially during the three major festivals: Passover in spring, Shavuot, Pentecost in early summer, and Sukkot, Tabernacles, in autumn. These journeys often involve traveling through dangerous territory, making the psalmist's longing even more poignant. Then comes verse 4. "Then I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy, and I will praise you with the harp, O God, my God." This verse reveals the psalmist's ultimate destination, not just physical arrival at the temple, but a restored relationship with God characterized by joy and worship. The phrase, exceeding joy, translates the Hebrew, Sidchat Gili, literally, the gladness of my rejoicing, a doubled expression indicating overwhelming emotion. Archaeological findings have uncovered numerous small harp-like instruments from this period, confirming the central role of musical worship in ancient Israelite practice. Music wasn't merely entertainment, but a crucial avenue for spiritual expression and community formation. Professor Eliana Cohen, an expert in ancient musical traditions at the University of Tel Aviv, explains, "The mention of the harp, or kinnir in Hebrew, connects this psalm to the rich tradition of temple worship. Music served as a bridge between the human and divine realms, elevating the worshipper's experience beyond mere words." The psalm concludes with a remarkable self-dialogue in verse 5. "Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my help and my God." This verse reveals an internal conversation, showing the psalmist actively working to reorient their perspective. The Hebrew phrase for cast down, shachak, carries connotations of being bent over or pressed down, vividly depicting the physical manifestation of emotional distress. What's particularly striking is how this final verse is identical to the refrains found in Psalm 42, verses 5 and 11, strongly suggesting these two psalms were originally a single composition that was later divided. This repetition serves as a powerful reminder to the psalmists themselves, almost like a mantra, to counter despair with deliberate hope. Dr. Jonathan Parker, professor of ancient literature at Oxford, observes, "This self-exhortation reveals an understanding of human psychology that was remarkably advanced for its time. The psalmist recognizes that emotions can be actively redirected through intentional self-talk and reframing of circumstances. But what does this ancient poem mean for us today, nearly 3 millennia later? Consider the story of Marcus Jeffries, who found himself unjustly incarcerated for 8 years before DNA evidence finally proved his innocence in 2017. During those dark years, he recounts how the words of Psalm 43 became his lifeline. When everything was taken from me, my freedom, my reputation, my future, I encountered these ancient words that gave voice to exactly what I was feeling, Marcus shares. That first line, "Vindicate me, O God," became my daily prayer. What sustained me wasn't some superficial positivity, but the ability to be brutally honest about my situation while still reaching for hope. Or think about Miriam Rostami, who fled religious persecution in her homeland in 2019, leaving behind everything familiar. When the psalm speaks of walking about mournfully because of oppression, that was my reality, she explains. But I also connected with the longing for God's light and truth to lead me to a new sanctuary. This wasn't just poetry to me, it was the language of survival. Recent studies reveal the psychological impact of feeling abandoned or treated unjustly. A 2023 report from the International Journal of Trauma Studies found that perceived injustice is one of the strongest predictors of prolonged psychological distress following traumatic events. The research showed that people who can name and process feelings of abandonment and injustice recover more effectively than those who suppress these emotions. Psychologist Dr. Rachel Thompson explains, "What's remarkable about Psalm 43 from a therapeutic perspective is how it models healthy emotional processing. The psalmist doesn't deny negative feelings, but expresses them fully before intentionally redirecting toward hope. This pattern aligns perfectly with modern evidence-based approaches to processing trauma and grief. The journey from lament to hope that we witness in Psalm 43 follows a pattern found throughout the Hebrew Psalter. Of the 150 psalms, approximately 1/3 are categorized as laments, honest expressions of pain, confusion, and complaint directed toward God. Yet remarkably, most laments, including Psalm 43, don't end where they begin. They move from darkness toward light, from complaint toward trust. Biblical scholar Dr. Walter Brueggemann has famously described this movement as a journey from orientation through disorientation to new orientation. This pattern reflects not just individual spiritual journeys, but the collective experience of Israel throughout its turbulent history. The Babylonian exile in 586 BC, when Jerusalem was destroyed and many Israelites were forcibly relocated to Babylon, represents perhaps the most dramatic national disorientation in ancient Israel's history. Many scholars believe psalms like this one either emerged from or were reinterpreted during this traumatic period. Archaeological discoveries from this exile period reveal how Israelites struggled to maintain their religious identity while displaced from their homeland. Clay tablets found in sites like Al-Yahudu in modern Iraq document the presence of Jewish communities in Mesopotamia, showing how they adapted their practices while longing for return to Jerusalem. By the time of the Second Temple period, 516 BC to 70 CE, psalms like this one had been compiled into liturgical collections used in temple worship and synagogue gatherings. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered beginning in 1947, include numerous psalm manuscripts dating from around 100 BCE, confirming the continued importance of these texts in Jewish religious life. When Jerusalem fell to the Romans in 70 CE and the Second Temple was destroyed, These psalms again took on renewed significance as expressions of communal grief and hope for restoration. Jewish communities in diaspora continued to recite these words as connections to their homeland and heritage. Early Christian communities also embraced the Psalms, interpreting them through the lens of their emerging theology. By the 4th century CE, monastic communities throughout the Mediterranean were chanting the entire Psalter weekly as part of their spiritual discipline. What makes Psalm 43 enduringly powerful is its raw honesty combined with stubborn hope. The psalmist doesn't offer simplistic answers or deny the reality of suffering. Instead, they model a relationship with the divine that can withstand the weight of genuine questions and complaints. Contemporary philosopher Dr. Elaine Matthews suggests, in our age of curated social media personas and pressure to project constant positivity, Psalm 43 offers a radically different approach. It demonstrates that authentic spirituality includes space for doubt, anger, and questioning. These aren't signs of weak faith, but of genuine relationship. This perspective finds strong support in religious traditions worldwide. Rabbi David Stern notes, in Jewish tradition, wrestling with God has been honored since Jacob became Israel, literally one who struggles with God. Psalm 43 continues this tradition, showing that faith isn't about having all the answers, but about staying in the conversation even when it's difficult. Similarly, Christian theologian Reverend Dr. Marcus Jones observes, what many miss about biblical faith is how deeply incarnational it is, not floating above human experience, but firmly rooted in it. Psalm 43 doesn't ask us to deny our pain, but to bring it directly to God, trusting that divine light and truth can meet us precisely in our darkest moments. Across diverse religious traditions today, Psalm 43 continues to be incorporated into liturgy and personal devotion. In Catholic and Orthodox traditions, it forms part of the Divine Office prayers. In many Protestant denominations, it appears in responsive readings and hymns. Jewish communities recite it as part of weekly synagogue services. Beyond formal religious settings, these ancient words continue to inspire contemporary artists, musicians, and writers seeking to express the tension between suffering and hope. Grammy-winning composer Alicia Montgomery's 2022 choral piece, Send Out Your Light, draws directly from Psalm 43, reinterpreting its ancient Hebrew poetry through modern musical idioms. What drew me to this text, Montgomery explains, was its unflinching honesty. It doesn't pretend that everything is fine when it isn't, but it also refuses to surrender to despair. That tension creates a powerful space for authentic human experience. So how might we apply the wisdom of this ancient poem to our modern lives? First, Psalm 43 invites us to practice radical honesty in our spiritual lives. Rather than pretending we have everything together, we can acknowledge our feelings of abandonment, confusion, or injustice. Psychological research consistently shows that naming difficult emotions is the first step toward processing them effectively. Dr. Sarah Williams, clinical psychologist specializing in spiritual trauma, notes, many people suffer unnecessarily because they believe certain emotions are spiritually unacceptable. Psalm 43 offers a powerful counter-narrative, showing that even feelings of divine abandonment can be expressed directly to God. Second, this psalm models the importance of remembering our ultimate source of identity and hope, especially when circumstances seem to contradict it. The psalmist continues to say, "My God," even while questioning where God is. This paradoxical faith doesn't deny current reality, but refuses to make it the final word. Social psychologist Dr. Michael Chen's research on resilience suggests what distinguishes highly resilient individuals isn't the absence of suffering but their ability to maintain a core identity and purpose even amid severe disruption. The psalmist demonstrates this by continuing to claim relationship with God despite feeling abandoned. Third, Psalm 43 shows us the power of intentional self-direction. The final verse is self-questioning. "Why are you cast down, O my soul?" reveals the psalmist actively redirecting their thoughts rather than being passively controlled by them. This anticipates modern cognitive behavioral approaches by thousands of years. Consider how these principles might apply in our everyday experiences. When facing workplace injustice, rather than either suppressing our feelings or being consumed by them, we can acknowledge them fully while still taking constructive action toward resolution. When experiencing relational betrayal, we can honestly name our pain while refusing to let it define our entire identity or determine our future capacity for trust. When confronting systemic inequities, we can simultaneously acknowledge the gravity of present injustice while working from a vision of future restoration. When dealing with personal failure, we can face it honestly without allowing it to become our defining narrative. The wisdom of Psalm 43 isn't about quick fixes or spiritual bypassing. It's about embracing the full range of human experience while maintaining a tether to transcendent hope. As we conclude our exploration of this ancient Hebrew poem, let's return to its core question: where is God when injustice prevails? The psalmist doesn't offer a theoretical answer, but a lived response, continuing to seek divine light and truth even when they seem absent, moving toward worship even while still questioning. Professor Elena Rodriguez, historian of ancient religions, reflects, "What makes the Hebrew Psalms unique in ancient literature is their unflinching engagement with divine absence alongside divine presence. Unlike propaganda texts from surrounding empires that only celebrated divine favor, these poems embrace the full spectrum of human experience with God." This approach offers wisdom that transcends any single religious tradition. Whether you identify with a particular faith or none at all, Psalm 43 speaks to the universal human experience of seeking meaning and justice in a world that often seems to lack both. The final image of the psalmist moving toward the altar, toward reconnection, joy, and praise, isn't presented as an erasure of previous suffering but as its transformation. The questions aren't dismissed. They're incorporated into a larger narrative of hope. And perhaps that's the most profound insight this ancient poem offers our modern world. Authentic hope isn't the denial of present darkness, but the conviction that light still exists and can be sought, even when we cannot yet see it. "Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my help and my God." These words have sustained countless individuals through personal and collective tragedies for nearly 3 millennia. They continue to speak today, not because they offer easy answers, but because they honor the complexity of human experience while refusing to surrender the possibility of restoration. In a world that often demands either naive positivity or cynical despair, Psalm 43 charts a third path: clear-eyed honesty about present reality coupled with stubborn hope for future redemption. It's an ancient wisdom we still desperately need. Before you go, I want to personally invite you to be part of our growing community here at Prayer Universe. If this video touched your heart or brought you peace, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a prayer or message that can uplift your spirit. But most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, Share just one word or phrase of motivation that this video inspired in you, whether it's hope, gratitude, peace, or something else. Your words matter deeply to us because they help guide the content we create for this channel. Together, let's build a space filled with faith, encouragement, and connection. Thank you for being here, and remember, every prayer counts. See you in the next one.